The first one I want to introduce on stage is a wonderful lady I've known very short period of time, but you know, sometimes you meet someone and you just click. And that's Lucy Brogden. Lucy's the wife of John Brogden, the chairman of Lifeline and the former Premier of New South Wales. Lucy has lived through an amazing experience, and her energy, her aura, her compassion, you'll see within 2 seconds. So Lucy, if you don't mind, please come up on stage.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you all for coming tonight. Rob gave the speakers a brief, no notes, it's like a TED Talk. He has notes. Fortunately, there are bright lights. I can't see, so we're going to be fine. My name is Lucy Brogden. I wear many hats around mental health. It's become a quest for my husband and I to build stronger communities and to save lives. I'm very honoured to be a commissioner on the National Mental Health Commission, and in that capacity I chair two great committees that are really working to improve the wellbeing and build stronger communities for all. I chair the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance and work closely with Margot Lydon, one of the other speakers tonight. And I'm also honoured on behalf of the government to co-chair the Australian Advisory Group on Suicide Prevention. And really our key task, our only task, is to arrest the horrific rate of suicide in this country. And there is no one magic solution to that. But I think critical, in my heart of hearts and in my mind, it's people reaching out to people that save lives. Often when I talk to people who are bereaved and they're asking what is it that they could have done individually, there's nothing that many of us can do individually, but collectively we have so much power. So before I start, I wanted to congratulate Rob he's not a gunner, he's an absolute doer. You know, how many of us meet people who say, wouldn't this be a good idea? Well, Rob just gets in and does it and crash through in the most spectacularly positive way that is so energising to everybody around him. So, well done, Rob. I also want to acknowledge the first people of this nation, because when it comes to talking about suicide in particular, those statistics that Rob gave you are only literally half the story. Our First Nations people die at a rate 2 times greater than the mainstream Australians by suicide. The general rate is around 12.7 per 100,000 people. Up in the Kimberley, the latest data is 74 per 100,000. And I know that most of you are people from the financial markets. You're a numerate group. And that number cannot be ignored. It's beyond ignoring. And I'm often influenced and continue to be motivated by a quote from William Wilberforce, who led the anti-slavery campaign in the UK many years ago, where he said that, you know, you may look away, but you can't say you never knew. And so to talk about these numbers around suicide is so important because it motivates us all to action. So I'd like to acknowledge our First Nations people. Their power and knowledge of social and emotional well-being is something that we can all learn from. And to acknowledge their elders past and present and really work with them collectively, because they have the solutions for their communities, just as we know what the answers are for our communities. I'd also like to acknowledge all of you here tonight, and Rob's already done some of that with a moment's silence, but all of us with a lived experience of mental illness and of suicide. It's a very tricky thing, and those of you that have heard me speak generally know I can end up in tears because love is often at the heart of this. And it's finding that way to move beyond love to truly save someone and bring them back from the brink. And many of us think, you know, if love was just enough, we'd be there, but it's something beyond love, and it's finding a way to reach out and connect that is so powerful. So those of you that have been on the journey, there are many fellow travellers in the room. It's not an easy ride. It's a pretty rocky, wild roller coaster. But in talking to Rob and to many other people, I think that when you do come out of that abyss, that darkness, and find a way forward, you actually find that you're on a new level that's quite special. And so those of you that are struggling at the moment, please know that you can get better. And I know that that sometimes seems cruel to hear at the time when you're not feeling so well, but you can and you will. And there is love and support here. And if there's not enough love and support around you, then there's always Lifeline. 13, 11, 14. And Rob, your support of Lifeline is just tremendous. Tonight I'll tell you a little bit about our story and share some of that. I'll tell you a little bit about the work of Lifeline and why it's so important to be there supporting them. And there are pledge cards around the room, and there's this app that needs support. And there's groups like Prop that need to be heralded and shared with as many people as we can. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing at a government level and how people can get involved in really trying to make a difference in our communities. I often tell the story that with my own husband, and he was Leader of the Opposition, he didn't get to Premier, but I like to think he'd have been a good Premier, but he was a very good Leader of the Opposition. He was young, successful, the youngest political leader we've had in the country. But the person that people saw on the news was very different to the person that was coming home and the person in the office. There was a grumpy, tired, irritable person who was shouting at people, wasn't very pleasant to work with, wasn't pleasant to be around. I was a young, emerging psychologist. I'd had a career in investment banking, but decided that psychology was my passion. So I did all the wrong things. I'd get the textbooks out. I'd Google symptoms of depression and mood disorder and say, this is what's wrong with you. I know what your problem is. If you're looking for a tip, don't do that. We know a lot more, and this was 10 years ago. But John was able to get up, walk out to work, stand in front of television cameras and look strong and powerful and assertive, and come home and crumble into a mess. And I know, talking to many people, he wasn't the only one to live a pattern like that. There was elements of self-medication involved, and so he was really struggling with life. I thought, right, if I can't get him help, if he won't go to the doctor, then I'll bring medication to him. And Graham Cowan, another of our speakers, has heard this story before. So then I Googled serotonin. What's high in serotonin? I'd done a year of psychology. I knew enough to know what might work. Bananas are very high in serotonin. And you're laughing, but I know, I'm almost willing to bet someone in the room has done something similar to me. So our diet became a staple of bananas. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. There is a recipe book of 101 recipes with bananas. John's like, what's with the bananas? Fortunately, it was a time when they were cheap. I was doing everything I could to get bananas into our diet. And it was only years later, launching a book with Graham, that Gordon Parker at Black Dog Institute said, that's a lovely thought, Lucy, but you realise he'd need 20 kilos a day. But I tell you this story because, as I said, people come up and say, I did exactly the same thing. If it wasn't bananas, it's pumpkin seeds. But to me, it's an example of that love, and we will do anything to save the person that we care about. And if that's a parent or a child or a partner, you understand that desperation. We'll leave no stone unturned to save that person, to help them be the person we know that they can be and that they want to be. But for him, it all ended very spectacularly, with a very public and publicised suicide attempt. There is one thing that I will thank the media for, and there's not much I generally thank them for, but they did, in some respects, thwart his original plan. So fortunately, we were able to find him and get help in time. It was an incredibly black day for both of us. The interesting thing to me was it was in my mind straight away. The minute he walked out the door, I thought, I know what's going on. And I kind of held that panic for a while, but then I was able to get onto it. And again, I think that's something that as a loved one, as a carer, as a supporter, as a friend, trust your gut. And what we know about suicide and suicide prevention is the best thing you can do for someone is ask them. Ask them outright. Do you think you want to harm yourself? Are you thinking about taking your own life? Often people think that that's the trigger, but the research, the literature and the experience all tell us that that is the life-saving question to put to someone. Unfortunately, I didn't get time to ask that question as he went out the door, but I know many people have asked that question and been able to save lives. We then went to Royal North Shore Hospital in the middle of the night, followed by a television scrum of cameras, which wasn't pleasant, and spent time in locked wards and secure facilities. Again, not a pleasant experience. And it wasn't long after John was in the ward that I went to visit him one day, and our son was 18 months old, and he said, "Do you know, Lucy, there's a thing called self-awareness?" I said, "Yeah, do know about that." He said, "I haven't got any." I said, "That's exactly why you're here." And I think the challenge that particularly around mood disorders that we don't always understand is that someone's self-awareness is often the first thing to go. They can't necessarily see it in themselves. They may be feeling down, they may not be able to sleep, or they may only be able to sleep all the time, they may be hungry, or they may have no appetite, but they can't connect the dots. So as friends, as carers, as loved ones, as colleagues, as co-workers, often we can be the best mirror to that change. To be able to say, "I notice things aren't the same. Something's going on. I imagine that's quite distressing. I feel very concerned for you. Is there anything I can do to support you?" And to reach out. But don't assume that they know what's going on for them, because this self-awareness just almost evaporates. And it's so powerful that we can reach out and be that mirror and help them see what they mightn't be able to put together for themselves. And it's not going to happen quickly. It might be a number of conversations, but even them knowing that you're there and aware enough can be very powerful. When people asked me when John was in hospital, how did I feel? My honest reaction was absolutely relieved, because I knew then that we were on a journey to recovery. He was in the place he needed to be, getting the help he needed to get. And all credit to him, he actually took full responsibility for his illness. He acknowledged it once it was pointed out, and 11 years later he's still taking his medication every day, he's still working with his psychiatrist when he needs to, and he's managing his lifestyle the best he can. And really, as a partner, I can't ask for or expect anything more than that. His self-awareness has come a long way, so he's much more aware of his triggers and is able to be a functioning, productive, contributing member of society, chairing Lifeline, holding down a CEO position. And where he's particularly lucky is he can have a legitimate mental health day. And I kind of say that in jest. And as a chair of the Mentally Healthy Workplace Alliance, it's my dream that everybody can have a legitimate mental health day. Because actually I was talking to someone in food safety recently. They said if we had as much food poisoning as people report as a reason they can't come to work, or as many migraines as people report, we'd be in real trouble. Because sadly people can't say, "You know what, I'm struggling, I need a couple of days in bed, I need to sort myself out, and then I'll be back bigger and better than before." But for John, he can actually go to ring his EA, ring his chair and say, "You know, struggling." That might be 10 days of the year. But his companies or organisations trust him enough to say, "That's fine, because on those other days of the year you're fantastic and we're going to get a lot more out of you. So you take the time you need and get better quickly." And I think that is my dream, that most organisations or all organisations can get to a level of maturity where their staff feel that they can trust the organisation enough to say that, and the organisation can be supportive enough to accommodate that. And in talking about mental health in the workplace, which I do quite a bit, a number of people will come up to me and go, "No one in our organisation, no one, got no mental health issues here." Well, if we know that 1 in 5 Australians are going to experience a mental illness at some stage, I say back to them quite directly, well, that's a reflection on you, not your staff. Because the numbers say that you have to. have someone with a mental illness. I also have many big employers tell me that no one's ever died by suicide or had anyone affected by suicide. And again, I say to them, that's a reflection on you and your organisation, not your staff. And so if you are an employer, a manager, a team leader, and no one's disclosed to you struggling, living with, battling a mood disorder at some stage in your working career, you've been working, say, 10 years or more, think about perhaps how accessible you're being to yourself and your team and what messages you're giving out to make it comfortable for them to disclose. So I've covered our journey. I've covered a little bit about mental health in the workplace, just touched on that, but I really want to close off on Lifeline and why it's so important. And Rob did the hands up on knowledge, but the hands up on knowledge would be quite different around Lifeline. They take 1 million calls a year. And Lifeline has incredible technology that allows our fantastic telephone counsellors to trace the call and send in help if they need it. And on average, they're doing that about 10 times a day. So if you add that 10 times a day of sending in emergency services to save someone that's done something or to help someone come back from the edge, and you add that to the 8 people that are dying by suicide and the numbers of people that are attempting, it's truly a horrific situation that we're facing. And the people that call Lifeline aren't just suicidal, they're dealing with a range of issues. But a key issue for many people is loneliness. And that's why I love the people reaching out to people as a model, because that's what we can all do to save lives. It's a truly life-saving event. Kevin Hines, who talks about people on the Golden Gate Bridge, cites a fantastic example, and I'll close with this and leave it to you as a challenge as to what you might do. One of the guys that survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, and there aren't many, said that he set himself a goal that if he got to the middle of the bridge and no one had made eye contact with him, he would jump off the bridge. Now, we can't put a rational lens over that thought process, but that was his thought process. In that walk along the Golden Gate Bridge, and for those of you that have been there and seen it, it's a pretty long bridge. Not a single person made eye contact with him. And I was telling Rob that after hearing that story, it's become my mission when I'm on the street to make eye contact with as many people as I can. And I'm mindful of that loneliness all the time. And when we see people on their own, how hard is it to just say, hi, how you going? Make eye contact, give a smile. We get very caught up in our busy worlds. But to me, that's a life-saving event. So thank you all for coming out to support Rob and Prop and for a great night with Mental as Anything. I've got many jealous friends because we remember the Mentals from uni days and Bondi at the pubs and things like that. But if you can support Lifeline, if you can support Prop, thank you very much for that. And remember, it's only when you've been in the deepest valley that you truly know what it is to stand on the highest mountain and how magnificent. So now I'm going to hand over to Graham Cowan.